the largest union talk radio program in the South. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Joe Harrison, graphic designer, video producer extraordinaire, filling in for Jacob and Adam as they are out on Christmas break. But as always, don't let that set any expectations for you that this will be entirely rehashes and best of segments. We do have plenty of new stuff in store for this episode, so you're definitely going to want to stick around. We would, of course, love to hear your thoughts. You can leave us a voicemail anytime throughout the whole week. 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. Or you can also contact us via tvlr.fm/contact. To kick things off, we have an interview that Jacob did. If you're, honestly, whether you're from Alabama or not, there's a good chance that you have probably heard of the documentary called The Alabama Solution. It premiered on HBO, I believe, in October. And it's definitely something that you're going to want to check out if you had any uncertainties whatsoever about the state of things in Alabama's prison system. Definitely check it out. And of course, if you already knew, if you already had inklings on the sorts of things that go on in there, give it a watch anyway, because it's a really well done documentary and extremely shocking, even regarding the things that, I already knew about going into it. It was still shocking nonetheless. Jacob was able to catch up with the producers behind the Alabama Solution documentary, and so we are going to just dive right in, and I'll be playing that interview for you now.
I am joined on the line by Chris Izor and Beth Shelburne, co-producers of the Alabama Solution. Chris, Beth, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. Thank you for taking the time.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Chris, I'll start with you. Could you tell us a little bit about how this project came together? What made you want to do the documentary?
Yeah, so our two directors, Andrew Jarecki and Charlotte Kaufman, started filming some just general interest, interviews and basic, information gathering in sort of early 2019. One of the directors, Andrew, had come down and visited the Equal Justice Initiative's memorial sites down in Montgomery over a school break, met Chaplain Curtis Browder, who was the first Black prison chaplain in the Alabama Department of Corrections. And through that meeting and basically connecting with other people who were in the familiar with the background of, what we would eventually sort of look into, that kicked off the documentary, but also just an exploration of like what's going on within the Alabama Department of Corrections. Around that time, the Department of Justice at the federal level had released a major report in April of 2019 saying that all Alabama's prisons, the system as a whole, has unconstitutional conditions and that the state needs to do something about it, lest they may face federal litigation. And so all those were sort of happening at the same time. And Beth and I joined the production team sort of over that summer of 2019, and things really escalated in the fall with some of the stories that we were following. And so we've been making the film for a long time. And so those directors are not from Alabama, but they've spent a lot of time in Alabama for the last 6 years, talking with a lot of people who have deep roots here. And Beth and I are both from Birmingham. And so we've been part of it from the beginning.
So, Beth, he's talking about that this has been a long time in the works. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add to that, just as far as the kind of dedication and length of time that it took to create this product for folks to be able to see. Well, is there anything else that you would want to add to that part of the story, just how long this has taken?
Well, yeah, I think that's what kind of makes this documentary different from all of the other coverage that's out there about mass incarceration and Alabama prisons in particular, is this was a really long process of the two directors just embedding into this story by coming to Alabama, spending a ton of time. Charlotte Kaufman, the co-director, actually lived with me for a while. She stayed in our basement apartment, and would stay here for months at a time when we were following stories. And so when you are playing the long game as a storyteller in a story this complex, which is really about a system in crisis, you can pull together a portrait that is much more comprehensive and takes a much broader view of the system failure than just a one-off story, or even like a documentary project that's put together over a period of, say, like a year. This isn't 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. It's 6 years worth of study, interviews, research, reporting, just really deep journalistic practices to try to get at some of the deeper truths in this story that can maybe be lost on folks that aren't involved in this or don't have somebody locked up in the system.
There are, as I see it, and I've only watched it through once, and so maybe there are some other kind of through lines that you would want to bring up. But as I see it, there were sort of two narrative arcs from the filmmaking perspective, and one of those being the murder, what appears to be allegedly a murder by prison guards of a prisoner, Stephen Davis. Obviously, folks should watch the documentary. You're going to get a lot more detail and a lot more pieces of the story than we'll be able to go into now. But can you talk to us about that case and what happened?
Yeah, sure. So, Stephen Davis, was 35 when he was killed in, Donaldson Prison in Bessemer, just a little bit west of Birmingham. He had only been there for a few weeks, and what we know from our research, from the incident reports and all that stuff, is that his death was a homicide, and all signs, from our initial investigation pointed to there being officers involved in his death by a beating. And part of the story sort of follows closely his family, particularly his mother, Sandy Ray, as she tries to get more answers about how this happened, why it happened, and also just so it follows her experience as a family member of someone who's incarcerated, trying to get an understanding of, how their loved one fits within the system, how they stay safe, or in this case, were not able to stay safe. But also understanding bigger issues of, issues like corruption, issues like stonewalling, a lack of public information, and access to truth even. And so we follow the story of her understanding what happened to her son and why, but also sort of her coming into an understanding of how the system works. And Sandy's from, rural Alabama. She says it in the film. She has trouble sometimes communicating with other people in her community because they don't really understand or think it's important to know what goes on in the prisons. And she says, I didn't ever think that I would have to understand or care about what happens within Alabama's prisons until my son, went to prison, and now suddenly he's home dead, seemingly from guard abuse.
And I think it's important about the Stephen Davis killing and Sandy Ray's journey is this isn't unique. Unfortunately, this is a universal experience for thousands of families across Alabama. The prisons have always been deadly. People have been dying at astronomical rates forever, but particularly in the time period when we were filming, the mortality rate was the highest in the nation compared to any other state prison system. And what these families are faced with is not only the grief and the shock of their loved one dying, but when you die behind bars, everything is clouded in secrecy, sometimes people never learn the cause of their loved one's death or what led up to it. Oftentimes, families receive none of their loved one's belongings back. There's even been cases where the prison system has buried people without notifying the family that their loved one is deceased. So it's really a quagmire, and it's a very particular experience that people are having. And Sandy is emblematic of that. Unfortunately, it's just not unusual.
You know, you and Chris both talked about Sandy's journey, and there's a scene that like has not left me, where she's like in a diner or a cafeteria or something, and she's telling somebody about the death of her son, and the guy asks something like, you know, well, was he involved in drugs or something? And she says, you know, kind of meekly, like, well, yeah, you know, I mean, he was in prison, or, you know, there was something like that. And like, you could just see his face fall. And like, it was like, oh, I don't give a shit anymore. Like, because he deserved to be in prison. And so, you know, sometimes things happen. Like, that shocked me. And you know, I mean, like I said, it's something that has not left me since I watched it. And I couldn't imagine being Sandy and trying to tell people about the death of her son, who was troubled and had problems and like wasn't, you know, an angel or whatever, but didn't deserve to be beaten to death. And just, you can literally see it on his face that he doesn't care. And you know, what was that like? I don't know which one of you, or if either of you were there when that was filmed, but what was that like? Like, and I'm sure that wasn't that was just kind of, you know, I'm sure it was picked for a reason, but that couldn't have been the only time that happened. And so what was that like, seeing her kind of have to deal with people not caring?
Beth,
I don't know, Beth, if you want to take that one. I don't know.
Journalist doing that, yeah.
I wasn't there when Charlotte Kaufman, the co-director, filmed that scene with Sandy. But we did put it in the film because it also represents an almost universal experience of incarcerated people and their families, this othering from the general public, where they look at your family member and in turn look at you as someone who is less than everyone else just because they're in prison. And then there's also this idea that whatever happens to you when you go to prison is your own fault because you're in prison. And, you know, people don't go to prison to get beaten to death or get raped or, you know, falling in further into addiction or any of the other things that have been happening to people. You know, they go to pay their debt to society through a loss of liberty. And that's it. You know, that's the containment part of it is the punishment. But we have piled on, you know, so much other baggage on top of people that are in the system. And so, yeah, Sandy, I think, encountered that quite a bit. And I think, you know, family members all over the country who have somebody locked up encounter that kind of brittleness from people that think they're better or think it could never be my family because we don't break the law. I mean, we all are one bad night away from being in prison if we want to be honest. But I think a lot of people aren't honest with themselves and with the rest of the world. And so people in prison are a nice slice of society to look down on and to make yourself feel superior.
Since y'all were filming the documentary, over the course of that, the guard who is alleged to have led the beating to death of Stephen Davis, he was promoted, and I think I've actually seen some individual articles about that since the piece. And there's an interview with him in the documentary. I don't know who was doing the interview, but you know, he just very clearly, you know, didn't care and felt like this was kind of beneath him during that interview. And you know, it's very difficult to imagine how it just, like, that guy should obviously not be a prison guard anymore. Like, I don't know how you make that guy be a better prison guard, but he obviously did not feel any pressure from above or below, any judgment or anything. And so one of the things that the people talk about in the documentary is that, one of the main causes of death is overdosing. And, well, how are the drugs getting in? They're getting in because of the prison guards, almost certainly. And so how do you increase the guard staff, because they're also understaffed, that you need more prison guards, but you also need prison guards who are set up in a way that they have less temptation to get corrupt. I mean, how do you fix that?
Yeah, I mean, I can say, in addition to seeing a lot of the side that doesn't get seen by the public, which is family members' experience of, when they have someone incarcerated, even, certainly this is a big part of the film, is communicating with people who are incarcerated and seeing their experience, and even like the recordings that they're able to take on contraband cell phones to document their own experience. We also have been in a lot of these prison oversight meetings and these, like, the machinations of power in Montgomery, to see, like, what's being discussed as the potential solutions to, what is clearly like a humanitarian crisis in Alabama's prisons. And people do look for silver bullets. They look for, well, what if we doubled the amount that we spend into the Department of Corrections budget? Would that solve things? What if we met our, prison guard, to incarcerated person ratios? Like, what if we fixed our overstaffing? What if we had more programs? And, like, yeah, all of these things in general, like, would probably contribute in some way to softening some of the crisis. But, a big thing that, Alabama has come up with is, what if we had, in the most, generous, good faith interpretation of the Alabama solution, what if we had functional facilities that were not decrepit, not rusted, and they were built for a 21st century prison system or something like that. And the problem with a solution like that is, among other issues, is, well, if everyone that if a big problem within your system right now is that officers feel no accountability for their actions. And not just that, but the state is spending millions of dollars settling lawsuits, defending officers in court when they abuse people, different things like that. Then how is a different building going to change? A different address is going to not necessarily be any different for the people's lives, who are, living their 24 hours a day within the walls of the prisons. And so there's, Jake, you asked, like, sort of how do you start to address some of that stuff? There's plenty of, like, small things that you can try to do, and they all have, the answer is that it takes a lot of different ones of them, but until you can address some of the seriousness of not just the culture within Alabama prisons that people are, officers can use excessive force and, be backed up by the state, but also that just the relationship of the state and people who are incarcerated is one of dehumanization. People lack respect for the people that they are, caring for, by statute. And so that's a dehumanization that I think is part of the core of things that allow this type of abuse to happen. So it takes a lot of things, but, addressing some of those cultural issues, I think everyone who's paying attention realizes that's a much more serious problem than, the buildings have a leaky roof.
Right. And one of the other storylines that I kind of saw was the prison strike. I can't remember what year it was, maybe 2021. Can you talk to us about, and the reason for the strike was a lot of the things that we've been talking about now, the overcrowding, the abuse by the prison guards, stuff like that. But all of that had been going on for a while. So I'm curious, what was the thing that made them finally pull the trigger, so to speak, and decide to go on strike? And how did they build a network of prisoners within the prison system such that they could pull it off? I mean, it was really effective at the very least for 7 to 10 days. They had all of the prisons in the state shut down, basically. I mean, it's an incredible feat of organizing. So how did they organize to such a point that they could pull that off? And once they were that organized, what was the thing that made them pull the trigger?
Well, I don't think that we know all of the dynamics and all of the tactics that they're using to organize on the inside, just like with any, labor movement. But these men have been organizing and demonstrating and doing direct action inside the prison for a long time. And this wasn't the first shutdown that they had organized. I think, at least from my communications with the men that were involved, I think the tipping point for them was disappointment in zero changes resulting from the Department of Justice being situated in Alabama beginning in 2016, doing a 3-year investigation, releasing those findings that Chris mentioned, saying that the entire system embodied unconstitutional conditions. They released a second report in 2020 calling the excessive force that officers use systemic and common throughout the system. And because the state of Alabama refused to agree to any of the remedies that the Department of Justice was suggesting to begin to correct these things, the DOJ sued the state. And we are here 5 years after that lawsuit has been filed, and the litigation continues. And it just becomes this dogfight between attorneys, and all the while, the body count continues to pile up coming out of the prisons, and the men are still suffering. And so I think it was something they felt that they could do. They, wanted to send a message. They feel very strongly that, the free labor and the forced labor that continues inside the system is part of the reason that Alabama continues to maintain overcrowded prisons and continues to over-incarcerate people, because we're extracting hundreds of millions of dollars in free services and labor and products every year for the state. And so this was something that the men, I think, felt that they could do. Their organizing is incredible. You get to see a little bit of it in the film. They use conference call, apps, just like, people in the free world do, to stay in touch with each other. And I think the passion and commitment that these men have for making some change is incredible. They are undoubtedly some of the most resilient people that I've ever met. And, as Kinetic Justice in the film says, we've pulled off the impossible, but I think they've proven that it is possible. And, I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of it.
Being a talk radio host, I love to see representation in films, and unfortunately, there was some talk radio representation in the film, and it did not come across well, I don't think, for the hosts. This was during the strike, and I can't remember exactly the words that he said to convey this message, but it was shut up and get back to work, basically. And I think for a lot of people listening, especially if you know anything about Alabama's prisons, that's going to come off as callous to you. But, we just talked earlier about how Sandy had to look this guy in the face, as he clearly did not care that her son had died. And so, when something is a little bit, going on strike and telling somebody to get back to work instead of going on strike is even a little less callous than, looking a grieving mother in the face and not caring about her dead son. And so, there are going to be a lot of folks that hear this that do have that reaction, not only to the strike, but to the documentary. And so, how do you make people care about people in prison and the conditions that they are being put in under our name?
Can I answer that, Chris?
Yes.
Because I got to jump in a minute. I appreciate the question, and it's an important one. But I think that if somebody watches this film, really watches it, and is open to what is being presented to them, and walks away and says, I still don't care about what happens to people in prison, then they need to do some real soul searching. Because when you are proximate to this level of suffering and just people that have been absolutely disappeared and thrown away using our tax dollars, it's being done in the name of public safety, but it's not making us safer. It's just transferring crime to facilities where people can't get away from the people that are committing the crimes. It has been an uphill battle during my time reporting on mass incarceration beginning in 2012. But I think, doing stories about prison conditions and the suffering that people are enduring inside our prisons used to be a real counter narrative, and it's not anymore. I think that the suffering is so pervasive, it's so unconstitutional, and it's just ubiquitous with the experience of being locked up in Alabama that, it is now the narrative about our prison system. Unfortunately, it's not the priority for our elected leaders. They still feel like they don't have to be accountable to this. And I think that's the power of this film, is it really might change that calculus. I hope it does, because the people in Montgomery have been comfortable with this for far too long.
Right. Beth, thank you for your work on the film, your work outside of the film, and for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for this conversation. I appreciate it. And I'm sorry I got to go, but thanks so much.
Oh, yeah, no worries at all.
Take care.
Yeah, I'll just put a tag on that from what Beth said. I think it's definitely true that a lot of people in Alabama, feel, and certainly beyond Alabama too, feel pretty similarly to, some of the callousness that was expressed by the radio hosts in the film. But I think most people don't actually engage with the reality of what happens in the prisons. And that's like a separation that facilitates that. And, and like we had said before, Sandy is somebody who is an example, representative in some way of people who are in our state who may have not cared or may have thought about things, or they sort of repeat, these mantras of like, well, you did the crime, so you got to do the time. And it's like, well, what is the time? Is the time like being sent to a torture camp?
Right.
But also, there's plenty of reasons that people should go beyond that type of callousness. If you're religious, there's no religion that calls for you to dehumanize your fellow man, and certainly not like celebrate brutal conditions of life. Most of, every religion I'm familiar with, calls us to foster the opposite. But also, even for people who are just, who are just tired of tax dollars going to a department that's just a huge sink for money, but isn't rehabilitating people to like, try and address issues of like harm or trauma or things like that. Something that we saw throughout the film or throughout the investigation was, it was widely known that the highest concentration of drugs, the community with the highest concentration of drugs in Alabama is not, different corners of, major cities or things like that. It's not in these like sort of rural areas that are facing, serious drug crisis. It's within Alabama's prisons, which are operated by the largest law enforcement agency in the state. And so many family members that we spoke to said, my son was not involved in drugs until he got to prison. And when he came home a serious, hardcore addict. And that has been so much harder to deal with then, like we wanted our son back and we didn't get our son back. Like we got back
Right.
someone who is so facing addiction that,
Well, and that's the
and they
thing.
blame the prisons,
Yes. And that's the thing that I guess, from a rhetoric or a partisan standpoint or a political standpoint, I guess I don't understand how opponents of these conditions have not been able to figure out a message. I mean, I haven't, right? I mean, I'm not like, leading a movement to fix Alabama's prisons, and there's not like just hundreds of thousands of people listening to me, and so, clearly I haven't done it. But it seems to me very intuitive that at least I'm not aware of anybody who would argue that Alabama's prisons rehabilitate people on any sort of scale. Like who is the person out there that is saying that on the whole, people come out of Alabama's prisons better than they go in? I don't know anybody making that case. And so they're doing all of this ostensibly in the name of public safety, keeping people safe. And yet very clearly, they're making people less safe because they're taking people who have done nonviolent crimes or, even violent crimes of passion. And, the 98% of people who ever go to prison are going to come out. And that's the way that we want it. We don't want basically anybody to be in prison for life. That's just not, we're not that kind of society. And I think it's good that we're not that kind of society. So people are going to come out of prison. And so the question is, how are they going to come out? And it seems very clear that, like you said, people are coming out worse and more likely to break the law. And so I guess I don't understand why the people who are defending this system or not making it a priority to fix it, why do they not have to, in the same way that if some, liberal, quote unquote, judge lets somebody out on parole, if one person that they've ever let out on parole commits a murder or does a crime, then they're on the hook and they have blood on their hands or whatever. How many people have come out of Alabama's prisons worse than they came in and killed people because of it? I mean, why? I don't know. Am I making sense or am I just kind of rambling?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say there's, one of the demands that has been raised a few times during the course of our, filming by some of the incarcerated organizers was basically, it's a little bit unusual sounding, but it's a review for, after, say 15, 20 years of someone's sentence, if they're denied parole, then the fault falls not on the individual, but on the department to answer for how is it that the department has not been able to successfully do what it's supposed to do, which is manage basic rehabilitation, programming or things like that for somebody like that. I mean, I'll say the when it comes to people, finding ways to defend the system as it is, it's rare that you have anyone who will say anyone who's involved in a position of power within the legislature or the executive branch or anything like that. I don't think anyone would ever say well, the conditions within our prisons are good. You may get some pushback to the issues may not be systemic or something like that. But where you do get into issues is when you start to talk about reforming our sentencing laws. So it's before you get to prison, the thing that keep people in prison for a long time. And it certainly, has been the case that when you talk about parole, finding ways for people who have served a lot of time, who have completed programs, who in many ways are rehabilitated, if that's, how we want to think about it, have a plan to get home, are denied parole, and the practice of, denying parole as widely as possible, was one of the things that, really created a significant amount of despair within the prisons, particularly in 2001 and 2021, 2022. That led to a lot of drug use, which was a consequence of some of that despair. And that is in many ways the part of what led the incarcerated organizers to say, we're never getting out of here, or people, this system isn't working, but also it's getting worse and they're not paroling anybody. We have to do something to like escalate, to get people to pay attention to the system. And so, when we talk about like what's the real solution, like if the Alabama solution is build a big prison, to try and address it, but that's not if we kind of largely feel that's not like a complete or real solution, then the real solution will be a major and multifaceted thing, but it will go beyond just the prisons itself. It will, address in some ways, why does Alabama, have serious issues with its sentencing where people are sent to prison for, many decades for things that may not necessarily be the case in other places. But also, like, why is it that people who, work in the community at work release jobs or things like that are not being paroled if they're, unsupervised, freely, participating, as like a free worker, might for 8 hours of the day, but then have to get, brought back to the prison camp, for the rest of the day.
Right.
And those are some of the just sort of general issues that we try to touch on in the film. Obviously, it's 2 hours to talk about a 6-year investigation, so there's
Right.
many springing off points, that we hope that, other journalists, investigators, and people who want to do reporting on this can pick up and go from there.
And I guess as we're wrapping up, I'm curious about any reactions that you have to the reaction to the documentary since it came out, or any of the developments around Alabama's prisons since the documentary came out.
What we've seen is that people really are shocked by the prisons. Even people who have, maybe they're an attorney and they have, visited a prison before to meet with a client, or people who are, people who are a little bit in the know are even themselves, I think, shocked by being able to see what's happening, through like video from the contraband cell phones, to hear the voices of people who are incarcerated, to see Sandy's experience as a family member of like trying to get answers and be stonewalled, being able to see the deposition with the officer, kind of expressing like no real remorse or anything like that. I think being able to like actually see those things is a step beyond just hearing, oh, the prisons are bad, or seeing a headline, on a website or something like, oh, well, there's more people dying in prisons. And I think people are feeling not just shocked, but pretty outraged. Both within Alabama, where we've done, a lot of community screenings, but also, around the country, where people who are, maybe working in, trying to address issues within their own local, state prison system or things like that, they found a lot of resonance with this. And I think that it speaks to, again, when we were speaking about, the sort of ambient lack of interest in Alabama's prisons, or maybe some of the general callousness that you might find, like sort of man on the street. It matters that people are seeing and experiencing in a small way the reality that, is so often kept from us. Partly because we don't want to hear it, but also because, the system kind of can't really function if it is exposed to this much, sunlight. This reality is brought to this many people. It's not something that can really continue to exist as it is. And so, we will be, we'll be keeping up with like what the response is within the state. The legislative session begins, kind of at the start of the year, in late January. We'll be curious to see, what some of the lawmakers that we know have seen the film, or the, other department heads or things like that we know have seen the film, begin to do when this window opens up for potential legislation to, either address oversight or, begin to take in some kind of responsibility for the reality that we feel we were able to bring forward in the film, that many people inside the prisons, have experienced for a long time, but many people beyond the prisons, are it's new information to them.
Right. Have you seen any bills that have been pre-filed that that make you hopeful, or has that not started happening yet?
It hasn't totally been happening. We know that there's a few things in the works, but a lot of times the session begins before some of the like more full-throated bills get passed. And it's always strange to watch the sausage get made, in Montgomery. So I think it's tough to know at this point what maybe coming down the pipeline. But I think after the holidays, as the year begins, we'll see. And we know that, there was a press release or a press conference last week or so that some of the incarcerated organizers are, planning for, further actions and things like that. So, we'll do what we can to document as much as we can along the way. And we're not sure exactly what it may become in, but we also encourage, other journalists and news outlets who've taken an interest in this to make sure that they are asking some of the questions about this issue as we get into a legislative session.
Chris Izor, a co-producer of the Alabama Solution. We were also talking earlier to Beth Shelburne, another co-producer. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I said no contract, you said no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
From the mountains of Tennessee to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama, this is the Valley Labor Report. My name once more is Joe Harrison, filling in today for Jacob and Adam. I am the graphic designer and video producer. This has sort of become an annual tradition, so I hope that you will stick around with me today. Once again, it's not just old stuff that you've seen already. We have plenty of new material sprinkled in, so definitely stick around. We just wrapped up on a conversation with producers of the Alabama Solution about the making of their movie and the state of Alabama's prisons. If you missed that, you can find it on Facebook and YouTube at the Valley Labor Report. We've got a great best of from last year for you, a conversation with Sam Seder from the beginning of Trump's second term that we look forward to sharing with you. Even though this is a pre-tape, we would love to hear your reactions. You can leave us a voicemail anytime throughout the week at 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. Or, of course, send us a note using the form on our website, tvlr.fm/contact. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time we wrap here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, then you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, tvlr.fm. But we are, of course, also on YouTube, Facebook. I believe we're also on Twitch now, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support keeps us on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or go to patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. And as always, be sure to check out our store, tvlr.fm/store. We've always got some great stuff there. Definitely check it out. And that is another good way that you can help support what we're doing. Finally, if you are a member of a union, you should get your local district council or international union to sponsor the show. Reach out to us for more details on that. We would love to connect with y'all. Let me add a disclaimer, of course, that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you are listening to us or watching us on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, WMSP, Means TV, or through your favorite podcasting app. And of course, we are very, very proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, and we encourage all of our listeners to check it out if you haven't already. As Adam likes to say, most of you know we are not media professionals, just a few diehard unionists who want to amplify voices of the working class, especially here in the American South, where it is really needed. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we simply can't do it without you. We want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you are a loyal fan or first-time listener, or even a hater who just wants to see, what sorts of crazy things comes out of our mouths. We really do appreciate you spending some time with us. Now, with all of that preamble out of the way, so 10 months ago, right after the Trump administration was sworn in and DOGE, or the Department of Government Efficiency, so-called, was enacted, we had Sam Seder on the show. Sam is a longtime progressive talker, as most of you probably know, getting his start on the radio and now hosting one of the largest progressive podcasts in the country, The Majority Report. During our February interview, we were reacting in large part to DOGE. At this point, we can see that DOGE has been a complete and utter failure, having been disbanded much earlier than planned and as quietly as possible. But we noticed, and I mean, of course, it was difficult not to notice since it was preceded by the extremely dramatic finale of the romance subplot between star-crossed lovers Donald Trump and Elon Musk. We thought it might be worthwhile to play this interview for you. His analysis and predictions here have completely withstood the test of time, whereas the more, pro-Trump, pro-Elon types, well, their analyses and sycophantic predictions have aged like milk. So without further ado, let us revisit this interview with Sam Seder.
We have on the line now Sam Seder, host of The Majority Report. Sam, welcome back to the program. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Jacob. It's great to be here. Forgive me, my voice is a little bit raspy. I've been fighting a cold.
No worries at all, and appreciate you fighting through it, being willing to come on the show even with a cold. I do appreciate it. Hopefully you're going to be on the mend very soon.
Yeah, let's hope so. Sorry, I need to get some tissue.
So, for those who don't know, I think most of our audience is going to be aware of you, but Sam Seder hosts The Majority Report. It's a progressive political talk show on YouTube and as a podcast. It started on the radio, although as far as I know, you are no longer on the radio anymore, but people can find you all over the internet. More than, is it millions of subscribers or 1 point something million? Lots of subscribers on YouTube. So I listen very, very regularly. And you've been talking obviously about stuff that's been going on in the Trump administration and his attacks on the state. And you've been referencing, this clip from Steve Bannon back during the first administration, where he talked about how the goal is to kind of dismantle the administrative state. And, a lot of that kind of talk does have support among a lot of people. And Asmongold on YouTube, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he is a politics streamer on Twitch, puts clips out on YouTube, and I'm gonna show you like the first 10 seconds from a recent YouTube video that got over 1 million views, this one, where he kind of expresses like a pop level sentiment about what's going on with these DOGE and quote unquote efficiency efforts. Let's play this clip from Asmongold.
There's a lot of retards that work at the federal government that do basically nothing. And so DOGE is made to get rid of those retards, right? To delete them.
And so, I think that's more crudely probably than most people would put it, but that's kind of like a popular sort of, or I mean, I don't know exactly actually how popular it is, but there are a significant number of people that actually believe stuff like that believe that lots of federal workers are just sucking on the government teat, and there's so much waste, and a lot of it is going to greedy, lazy federal workers, and there's so much waste in the federal government. Why do you think that kind of talk has appeal?
Can I swear on this, or we're on the radio?
We're on the radio, yeah. So keep it
All right,
PG.
well, because I got some choice words for that guy. But no, look, I think the idea of we're living in an era where after 50 years now of a broad neoliberal consensus in our government that the markets can do better and government is largely in the way. I mean, this started with Reagan, and government workers have been scapegoated for at least actively for at least half that time as somehow being problematic. And I can appreciate why, people want efficiency in government. People want efficiency in everything. I don't know if you've dealt with your cable company lately, but the idea that you want people to be working and providing service for you, I think, is a universal one. But the idea that that guy has any clue as to what government workers does is a joke. And the idea, just even broadly speaking, that what, Doge, which is the name of his meme coin, incidentally. I mean, he's just using this to market himself. Right. The idea that Doge is in any way about efficiency is absolutely a joke. They're not doing an audit. They're going in there and they're destroying stuff. And, this is like the equivalent of saying, I don't like the furniture this guy's making in his shop, and going in and destroying the tools. That's what they're doing. They're destroying the apparatus of our government to provide for people. People should understand that, largely speaking, almost universally, government agencies exist for one reason. Now, there's some that have alternate reasons as well, but broadly speaking, government agencies exist to curb corporate power. They are there to basically make sure that corporations are not externalizing their costs on the rest of us. It is cheaper for a corporation to dump their chemical byproducts into a river, but they save money, they increase their profits, but we pay as a society in increased cancer rates, in birth defects, in our fish dying, et cetera, et cetera. And so what Elon Musk is doing is no different from what Republicans generally do. This has been their plan. Their plan was written up by a guy named Russell Vogt, who the Democrats, stage a futile filibuster against the other day, but good for them for fighting against him, whose plan is to go and demoralize federal workers to get them to quit so that you don't have people working at the EPA, the FDA, the National Labor Relations Board, Department of Labor. You don't have people working at the SEC, for that matter, or countless of other agencies who are professionals and who have been working at this and who are actually in these jobs to do their jobs. And they want to replace them with lackeys, essentially. And so, I understand the desire to be paying into a system that is providing benefits to you. And there are certainly in some instances where we have agencies that are not doing that in the way that we want them to, but that's an issue for lawmakers. It is not for a billionaire to come in there, pretend like he's going to take out this agency or that agency, and understand a lot of it is for cover. He doesn't care about USAID. He cares about the Consumer Protection, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. He doesn't care about, whether there's aid going to foreign countries. He cares about getting rid of the EPA. It is a bait and switch, and it's also just it's destruction of our system of government. And someday, my hope is we're going to get people who are running this government who are going to be more oriented towards providing benefits and support for working people and average Americans. And they're not going to be able to do that if there's no apparatus left after this.
Right. Exactly. And, it is so, I can understand exactly like you said, you want to see, efficiency, especially when your money is going to something. But I think particularly with reference to federal workers, I think my running hypothesis is that people who feel very, very strongly about that have never worked or interacted with a significant amount of people in both sectors, right? I mean, if you want to talk about,
of course,
there are people that are lazy within the government. Have you ever worked for a private company? Have you ever have you ever been in a management meeting, in a big corporate meeting, with private actors? I mean, the idea that the federal government is like the workforce or even management at the agency level is uniquely inept within the government is just so silly. It kind of belies a real lack of understanding about the world and a lack of worldliness, a lack of interaction with people. And I will say that Asmongold, I found this out when I was trying to research for this segment a little bit. Like he apparently talked about how I used to work for the federal government, so I know there's a bunch of people that are terrible. He worked for 2 tax seasons at the IRS, presumably as some sort of temporary hire, some sort of thing, right? And so now
he doesn't. Of course, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Exactly.
But I mean, if you just want to look at it as a data matter. Every dollar that goes to the IRS in terms of funding returns like $6 to $7 in revenue. So, if you want to measure it on a data level, it's every dollar you spend gets you 6 more for the U.S. government. I mean, it's quite obvious that they're doing their job there.
Exactly, and
frankly, if for every dollar you spent on the IRS, it was getting 10 or 20 back, these guys would be screaming even more because they don't want to pay their taxes. I mean, everything we're seeing is just Republicanism, right-wing conservatism, repackaged into a slightly sexier veneer. And yes, anybody who's worked in corporate America knows that job number 1 is to cover your butt. And, there are definitely there are good people who work in every industry and in every capacity for the most part. But the U.S. government is far more efficient than corporate America. Broadly speaking, I mean, I think we could look at the defense budget and see that, lobbying gets a lot of money.
The one agency, by the way, that is completely exempt from the hiring freeze.
Of course, it's on its face, it's total BS. But there is a relentless stream of misinformation and propaganda about this, from Joe Rogan on one end, up through CNN about this, because they are all in different ways making money off of creating this myth. Look, people don't make a lot of money off of providing social services.
Right.
They just don't. I mean, you don't have investors.
Quick story about that is, I think that you're familiar with Matt Brunig. He is, he talks about politics. He writes about politics. He's a former NLRB attorney that was fired from the agency because of a tweet, which is kind of funny, about Neera Tanden or something. But he said that immediately, the week that he was fired from the NLRB, a management side law firm came offering him more than double what he was making at the NLRB to come and work for them. And so, especially in the agencies that they are targeting, like the EPA, the CFPB, the NLRB, the DOL, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, all of these agencies, every single one of those civil servants could go and work for management and make 2 to 3 times more immediately, right? And so you're exactly right that, by and large, the people who are working in these agencies, there's some level of commitment and give a crap about the idea of, I want to protect workers' rights. I want to protect the safety of American workers. If they didn't care about it, they would go work for management and they would make more 100%. Money for it.
And understand, they've been working, a lot of these folks have been working, at this point, as far back as probably the Clinton administration, but they probably have worked, but you have a lot of people who've worked under George W. Bush, who worked under Barack Obama, who worked under Trump the first time, work under Biden. They're career professionals. They have done all of their experience and their schooling in a specific arena. Maybe it's labor law, maybe it's environmental studies, and they have both knowledge of their field and institutional knowledge as to how things work. You take those people out, these agencies become ineffective, and then it's basically off to the races for these corporate interests. And so you'll see I can guarantee you the amount of times that Elon Musk spoke or talked about in depth, or frankly, any Republicans. In fact, to the extent that you can find any Republicans who were talking about USAID, they were largely supportive.
Right.
Both in its charitable work and, frankly, there's a lot of work that is sort of like projects American soft power. So the sort of like State Department end of American imperialism. Some people have more or less of a problem with that, but the dollars that we're talking about are not significant in the context of the U.S. budget, and certainly the stuff that helps develop other countries is not. I mean, I was watching Joe Rogan the other day. He's talking about, look how ridiculous this is. We're spending money on Afghan schools. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when we invaded Afghanistan, and the idea was we weren't going to leave it a complete mess because that's what breeds international terrorism. And now the idea that we're trying to build schools is problematic. It's all smokescreen.
Well, and the USAID thing, it's interesting because we just had on Jeff Shirky, a labor historian, to talk about labor's connections to USAID and some of the nefarious things that the AFL-CIO has done in coordination with USAID and the CIA and the State Department abroad, including, like in Chile and the dirty wars in Latin and Central South America in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And yet I oppose what's going on with Elon Musk and USAID. And so for some people that don't think too much about that, you might get a little bit of whiplash from that. But for one, it is worth saying that USAID does do some good work that should be defended on its
without
merits.
a doubt.
But even setting that aside, if we want to actually talk about what is the U.S. government doing nefariously overseas, let's actually have a transparent process of evaluating and auditing this kind of stuff. Let's create a church committee within the Congress, like how we uncovered some of the other stuff that the CIA was doing before. And let's do something like that and actually have an open process instead of the executive branch illegally going in and impounding obligations that the Congress has allocated and doing it in this kind of semi-transparent sort of a smokescreen process where you can see some of the stuff on Twitter, but there's no hearings or there's no opportunity for the people in the programs to defend themselves. You don't hear the other side. You just see what's on Elon Musk's Twitter account. This is all, for one, it's illegal. It's a violation of separation of powers, obviously, but it is also not a serious attempt to figure out what we are doing overseas. And Marco Rubio himself said we are going to see a significant increase in the use of private contractors, which, by the way, contractor pay makes up 12% of the federal budget. Total compensation for federal employees make up only 4%. But none of this talk is about, are we going to cut contract employees? Are we going to bring contract employees in-house so we can save money and we can be more efficient instead of having these contractors where the CEOs are making millions of dollars and the employees are underpaid, or even the employees themselves are making more than federal workers? There's no talk about that. It's all aimed at federal workers who, again, total compensation is 4%. of the federal budget. And so, church committee, let's do something like that instead of allowing a billionaire to go in.
You don't even need a church committee. You could do this through Foreign Service Committee. I mean, there's plenty of that's the thing. It's total BS. I mean, I don't know how else to say this. I mean, the idea that Marco Rubio is, concerned that the U.S. government is trying to influence elections in some other country through, supporting an independent press or something. I mean, it's all bull. It's all bull. Like you say, he's going to bring in contractors. It's going to be more opaque, and they're going to do more nefarious things. I mean, and if the Congress believes that there's a problem with the way that money is being spent at USAID in some of these programs, they bring the head of the agency in, and they investigate it, and that's it. I mean, this is and most of these programs, incidentally, have been completely transparent, and they'll talk for, weeks now, it seems like, on the U.S. government supporting Politico. These are trade magazines that they're talking about, and there's subscriptions that different agencies get because they're reporting on government. I mean, I'd be more than happy to have government agency that provides this type of information across all of the agencies and provides it for free for the public. I mean, there's only two ways you're going to get it. One is if the government does it and provides it as a service for the government itself and for the public, or if you're going to you're basically outsourcing contractors, in this case, Politico Pro or whatever, Government Exec Pro, or there's a bunch of these trade magazines. And I'm aware of this. I've been looking into it because I knew the story was going to be in the agencies with this administration, and it's expensive to get reporters on this because there's just not a wide audience generally, and so much of what we're hearing is absolute BS, and people are buying it because Elon Musk is has been lionized, and so much in so many people in the tech press have basically been reporting on this guy as a way of, it's like entertainment reporters. Half of them want to work in the entertainment industry, and they know one of the routes into that is reporting on these people and doing so in a very uncritical way. It just so happens that in the tech world, it's a lot more dangerous for the rest of us.
Exactly. Exactly. And also, another thing that's problematic about what's going on here is the idea that it's not only just unaccountable billionaires violating the law and the separation of powers and all of this and illegally impounding, congressional allocations and things like this. It's also racist 19-year-olds, right? Which people are pretending to believe that the argument is we have to ruin some kid's life for inappropriate tweets or whatever. And that's a very mild phrasing, saying normalize Indian hate, saying I was racist before it was cool. Things like this, are a little bit more than inappropriate tweets. But we can both hold in our heads, this guy shouldn't have his whole entire life ruined and be destitute and homeless for the rest of his life, while also saying he should not have a top position at the head of the largest employer on the globe. And it's not even hard to say that. Like, there are so many other jobs other than at the head of the United States government that it's so silly that people like J.D. Vance are pretending there's no way that they believe that is what people are saying, right?
No, I mean, look, there's a couple of things going on here. One is, I think they all should be fired. They shouldn't have any access to what they're doing right now. What they're doing is patently illegal. And, but secondly, this isn't a situation where a 40-year-old, we found tweets of his or hers from 15 or 20 years ago when they were a kid. The guy tweeted this stuff last month.
Right.
Right. And so it's like, I mean,
has he grown?
The idea that we're punishing him for past, youthful indiscretions. Well, the theory behind that is somebody grew up, and understood like, hey, this type of bigotry is wrong and I don't do it anymore. There's no indication the guy has any, like, what? I was on a bender a month ago. I mean, honestly, like, what are we talking about here? And you know, so as far as I'm concerned, I don't give a rat's ass about this guy one way or another. None of these people are doing anything that's even remotely legal right now. The question is that, you know, who has standing to bring this to the courts, and will the Trump administration listen to the courts? Beyond that, listen, there is part of what the Trump campaign was about was changing our culture in such a way where bigotry is more tolerated. That's basically one of their agendas. They want to be able to use the R word, like that clip from that a-hole you played up front. They want to be able to say things like, you know, normalize Indian hate, or, you know, your body, my choice. That's what their agenda was. And they won.
Yeah.
And people can decide, you know, for themselves if that's the kind of society they want to live in. But I'm not going to feel any sympathy for this kid. The kid has no right to be doing whatever he's doing. And he's not a kid. You know, if he's a kid, why are we letting him into the control, essentially the control system for $6 trillion worth of U.S. government payments? And if he's not a kid, then he should take responsibility for himself like an adult. I mean, you can't have it both ways here. And so I think the guy should be fired because what he's doing is illegal. I personally would never hire someone like that, because if I have other workers, I don't want to subject those other workers to this type of bigotry in the workplace.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the question of standing. You mentioned the question of standing earlier, and I talked about in Last Week in Southern Labor how there was a lawsuit by some unions to keep these people from having access to the Department of Labor's data, and the judge agreed that the defendants, the unions, had presented some valid concerns, and he shares those concerns, but unfortunately they did not establish standing. And it's just so kind of bizarre to me, the idea, like, well, who the heck has standing to protect workers' privacy data as workers, right? I mean, the Department of Labor, this is their data as workers. Who has the standing to protect workers' data as workers, if not organizations of working people formed explicitly for the protection and mutual aid and support of work? I mean, it's just the most bizarre.
Right, and it's catch-22 because you don't know if you're an individual worker whose information has been compromised, and you won't know that until too late. We are, if not we are at the cusp of a genuine constitutional crisis here, because we don't have mechanisms for this type of lawlessness by an administration functioning within our own government. We just don't have the institutional experience and the systems to deal with this. And so it's going to be, we're going to have trouble going through the courts. You know, Trump got 270 lifetime appointees when he was there. So many of those judges are there because of their willingness to show fealty to Donald Trump. They have come up through the Federalist system, which is a right-wing, the Federalist Society, which is a right-wing sort of like incubator for right-wing judges. And they believe that the U.S. government should not function to protect workers, should not function to protect citizens, should not function to protect consumers, should not function but for to smooth the way for corporations to basically do what they want. I mean, that is, more or less their doctrine. They believe in something they call freedom of contract. They don't believe in the existence of unions. They don't believe in the right for people to unionize. And they are now implementing their agendas, and they're getting the opportunity to do it. And so, like I think you mentioned it in the last hour, so much of what Trump and Musk and Russell vote, people should remember that name because he's going to be the head of the Office of Budget and Management. And he's the one who wrote the chapter in Project 2025 about demoralizing the federal workforce. Literally said, I want to traumatize these people. I want them to be afraid to come into work every day. Because he doesn't want these people to show up and do their jobs. And their jobs is to inhibit corporate power to the extent that, the lobbyists in Congress will allow them to do it, or the courts for that matter. And this is, we are in a very precarious moment because it is unclear. So many of the things that the Trump administration is doing is to get to the courts and allow some of these right-wing judges and, frankly, justices on the Supreme Court to say, yeah, the National Labor Relations Board, that should not exist. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, that should not exist. The SEC should not have the ability to regulate cryptocurrency. This is what they're doing. They are trying. This is a 2 or 3 step process, and if it doesn't get to the courts, how do you stop them?
Right.
He's put in an attorney general who was looking into Trump University, 10 years ago. And he paid her $25,000 for a campaign, and then investigation over. She's been working as basically a foreign lobbyist. His U.S. attorney in D.C., he may not even be licensed there. He was representing a defendant, January 26th defendant, who had been violent towards the cops. He becomes the D.C. attorney, U.S. attorney, and basically drops the charges. I mean, this is a rigged game that we're watching. And, the important thing is right now, I don't want to sound too bleak, but I'm feeling pretty bleak about it. The important thing that people should be doing right now is organizing in one fashion or another. Labor is a great place to do that. Your union, or not even if it's not an official union, because, the system that we have to essentially unionize legally under the federal government is under incredible assault, literally as we speak. Right. And so people are going to just have to organize largely outside of a legal framework. It's not to be, I'm not saying criminal gangs, but I'm saying you're not going to get the legal protections that you would have 4 months ago.
Right.
Your employers is doing an unfair labor practice. There's nowhere to go now. They've destroyed the board.
Yeah, it's pretty bleak. And you said not like criminal gangs, but I mean that's how unions were originally classified in this country. Was literally criminal gangs. And so we'll see. Hopefully they're not successful in their attempt to completely dismantle the American regime of labor relations. But we'll be talking to folks about the labor relations before the NLRB, I'm sure, over the coming weeks and months. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Joe Harrison, the graphic designer and video producer, filling in for Adam and Jacob. If you're tuning in online, go ahead and like the stream, subscribe to the channel, or give us a 5-star rating if you're listening to us as a podcast. That goes a very long way to help spread the word about what we're doing and support the show as a whole. As we are coming up on the end of the first half of the show, I want to remind y'all that you can stick around with us. I mean, we have a lot more show after what you hear on the radio, so if you would like to check that out, go to Facebook or YouTube, look up the Valley Labor Report, and you can stick around with us as we go into the second half of the show. And we do have a great second half of the program lined up. We've got a pre-taped interview from last week that Jacob did with Ed Flash Ferentz, who of course most of you probably know as the host of America's Workforce Podcast. So again, once we are finished here on the radio, go to YouTube, Facebook, look up the Valley Labor Report, and you can continue the show. We've been playing an interview from February with popular progressive podcaster Sam Seder, host of the Majority Report. We would love to hear your thoughts on the interview and how you feel that Sam's predictions aligned with reality. I mean, I hope that something that really stuck out to you is just how predictable so much of that was. And hopefully, maybe, that encourages you to discount the analysis of folks who couldn't see it coming. So let us know. You can reach out to us at any time during the week. Leave a voicemail, 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. And once again, you can also send us a note through our contact form on the website, tvlr.fm/contact. That said, that was not the end of our interview with Sam, so we are going to play the second half of that for you now.
Changing subject, but not, within the kind of the same realm, you're one of your kind of longest running bits on the show on the Majority Report has been how much of a fan you are of Social Security and the Postal Service. And I say a bit as just like a recurring theme. Like, it's not like you actually, presumably you really are very passionate about the Social Security and the Postal Service. So let's talk about Social Security first, because that has also been in the crosshairs of Doge, despite, during election time, and it's people always pretend that Social Security is not in the crosshairs of Republicans. Doge is, exactly as you said, a Republican project. It is Republicanism, and Trump is a Republican. These are not kind of distinct types of people or ideologies or movements. It's all one and the same. And, one of my frustrations is the pretending that Social Security is not in the crosshairs of these people. But one of the members of the Doge caucus in Congress has explicitly called for cuts to Social Security. You played a clip of, I think Alex Lawson is his name, from Social Security Works on your program, interviewing one of these folks. And so explain to people why Social Security specifically is such like I'm not sure what the word is, but a big goal, like kind of the light at the end of the tunnel for the project of republicanism and libertarianism. Why is it such a big goal for these kinds of folks? And decode what they mean when they say things like raising the retirement age, right, and these other types of stuff.
Well, why it's such a target is easy. I can explain it in basically two phrases. One is, why do people rob banks? Because that's where the money is. A. And B, the other reason why Republicans have been against Social Security literally since its inception in 1936 is because it is so effective. And in keeping our, as a social insurance, in keeping our elderly out of poverty. And the reason why they have an issue with that, I think, is because it shows the potential for government in terms of supporting people. The reason why Social Security, I think, for me, has become, has been such a major theme on my show is in, this is the 21st year I've been doing this type of work. And in 2005, George Bush wanted to privatize Social Security. And that was about a year into my career doing radio at the time. And, I was 38 years old, and I hadn't really given a single thought to Social Security at all, because you don't when you're young. And, I spent a lot of time learning about it as a way to push back on the privatization of it. It is perhaps the single most effective program that we have in this country. Like I say, it keeps about 2/3 of our elderly out of poverty. It is a social insurance program. It is mean tested in the sense that we tax. In your retirement, you get taxed if your income is, past certain thresholds. So you pay into Social Security system. You don't know if at age 65 or now it's going to be 67 for you, for me, and for you, because they have raised the retirement age as part of the deal in 1983 with Ronald Reagan and Alan Greenspan. Did a commission. They knew that the boomer generation was gonna put more pressure on the Social Security system. So the full retirement age will be 67 for someone my age, and I'm only I'm 58, so it's only 8-9 years away from me. The Social Security system, like I say, keeps people out of poverty, and it also, what it does is, if your parents are 65 or 67, it keeps you from having to pay for them to be out of poverty. So you don't have to work for multiple generations of your family. You can work for, your kids or your future. You don't have to worry that your parents are forced to eat cat food. And it is, aside from, it constitutes about 1/3 of what the U.S. government does in terms, and it is, our payroll taxes go directly towards Social Security. The trust fund, which was basically like an extra to deal with the boomers, is going to run out 2033. That's an estimate. Could run out. Probably will run out a little bit later, but let's just call it 2033. After that, it will be 75% or 78% will be paid out. They could easily fix this by raising the cap on which we get taxed. So in other words, right now, if you make $176,000, your employer pays 6.2%. And you pay 6.2% of that into Social Security and Medicare. If you make over $176,000, let's say you make $1 million a year, you still only pay 6.2% on $176,000.
Right.
So if you make $3 million a year in wages, you still pay 6.2% on $176,000. So the percentage of what you pay of your income drops once you get above $176,000. They could get rid of that cap. And it's insurance. It's unlikely if you're making $1 million a year as a 45-year-old that you're going to need Social Security when you're older. But if you happen to put it all into crypto and crypto crashes when you're 67, you will be protected. You will live on Social Security. If not, then you'll get taxed on that Social Security. Now, Trump wants to get rid of the tax on Social Security, and people think, oh, that's a great idea. It's only helping rich people. It's only helping rich people.
Right.
Because the only people who get taxed on their Social Security are people who in retirement are making that much more money that they worry about getting taxed.
Right.
If you don't get taxed on your overtime, you don't get that credit in your Social Security down the road. And Social Security doesn't pay you necessarily. I mean, you get back more money than you put into Social Security. Does it give you the same returns as the stock market? It depends. Because I know a lot of people who turned 65 in 2008 and they were screwed. And you don't know when the stock market drops like that or crashes. Mm-hmm. You don't know, is it going to come back in a week? Is it going to come back in a month? Is it going to come back in a year? May take 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years. Wait a second, then I'm 70. So Social Security is a social insurance program. And if you don't need it, that means you're rich and you're fine. It's like complaining. I bought fire insurance for my house. 30 years later, I'm pissed off because I never had to use it.
Right.
Well, your house is protected. I mean, that's what it is. It's protecting your retirement. They're going to come after it, and they're going to say, we're not going to touch it for seniors.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to touch it for people my age. They're only going to touch it for people your age.
Right.
And they're going to say your age, and you're, you're in your 20s, your 30s, and you're like, I don't have to worry about that. It is, every year they raise it, it is a 7% cut. And they're going to raise it in such a way that they're going to actually add cuts to it. And the reason why they want this is because the U.S. government 20 years ago borrowed, much of our borrowing is from the Social Security trust fund. And if they don't have to pay it back, if the general budget doesn't have to pay it back because we've cut benefits for people, then they can spend more on tax cuts for rich people. That's why they have always wanted to cut Social Security.
I'm glad you mentioned that about the raising the retirement age, because that sounds a lot less bad than just an across-the-board cut, because we don't have a retirement age. We have like 70 retirement ages, and you can retire as early as 62 and receive Social Security payments, and like, I don't know, as late as some higher age. And but the amount that you can withdraw at each age is different. And so when they say raising the retirement age, it's just an across the board cut at all, however many different retirement ages, 69 and 13 months, or 69 and 12 months, or 70, 71 and 3 months, all of these, it's an across the board cut when they say raising the retirement age. And another thing that you mentioned on the show that I didn't realize before.
And ask a 65-year-old who has been, working as a super or doing construction or, working as a server in a restaurant. Do you care about that year?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. Right.
It makes a big, it's hard to project out when you're in your 20s and your 30s, even in your 40s, like this is going to make a difference to me. But when you get older, and if you've been working a job that's been demanding, and the people talk about, we've had people are living longer. People are living longer in the upper 50 percentile of the income distribution, but not in the lower 50 percentile.
Right.
People talk about, we don't have as many workers to support Social Security as we used to. That's true. In 1970, we had 3.5 workers for every one retiree. Now we have 2.51, but we're just much more productive. So there's plenty of money to support workers. But, it's hard when you're younger not to think like, well, they keep saying Social Security is not going to be there and it's unfunded. Let me tell you what else is unfunded 20 years out in the everything.
Exactly.
In fact,
everything is unfunded as of March.
As of March, the only things that are funded is Social Security and Medicare because they're a self-supporting system. Everything else is broke in March.
The entire government
Congress
is bankrupt.
decides to appropriate money for it and change the law. I mean, that's basically it. And like our people don't understand the basic functioning of government because in a large part, I think, that ignorance is helpful for people.
You also mention on your show a lot of times when you talk about Social Security that because of the income cap, it's been kind of relatively steady over the years. And so because it's been steady back in the last century and in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, even though it had that cap, the Social Security tax caught like 98% of the income in the United States or something. And now it only catches like 80-something%. And
yeah,
so
let me fix your numbers there. But
okay, yeah.
The real issue is it's back in 83, 91% of wages were touched, happened under the cap. 91% of money earned happened under the cap at that time. I don't remember what the cap was, but roughly equivalent to 176 in 1983 dollars. We have so much wealth disparity now that only 86%, 85% of wealth that is generated is underneath that cap. You've got rich people hoarding money.
Right.
And it's just, if, let's put it this way. If I make $300,000 and you make $20,000, your $20,000 is all going to be taxed, and $176,000 of my dollars are going to be taxed, and I'm going to have another $130,000 that's not taxed. But if you make $176,000 and I make $176,000, the entirety of that $340,000 is going to be taxed. And our system is much better off when we don't have that wealth disparity. But we do have that wealth disparity, and that's what we're seeing here. So we need to blow off the cap so that the super wealthy people in this country are paying more into Social Security, so that we don't have, like we had pre-Social Security, where there were 25,000 people living on the street on the Bowery in New York City, literally living on the street.
Right.
When I was a kid, I used to watch this show called The Bowery Boys. I didn't understand what it was about, but it was basically about a time where pre-Social Security, we had tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Americans who were living in abject poverty as senior citizens in this country.
Right. And as we're winding down, I wanted to talk about the Postal Service. We have been covering the NALC and the Postal Service contract negotiations relatively closely, and we've gotten a lot of letter carriers in the audience recently, and so we have I know we have several letter carriers that are going to be listening now, and the Postal Service is like Social Security, kind of one of your bailiwicks, one of the things that you're really passionate about, that you really like. So why do you like the Postal Service so much? What is it about that kind of gets you excited?
Postal Service is magic, right? I mean, it's like magic.
Yeah.
The stamp costs now, I think, closer to 80 cents for a letter.
73 cents.
Okay, I get forever stamps. I buy a bunch of those, so I haven't bought stamps in a while. But you put this on a letter, it doesn't matter where you're sending it in this country. The most remote region of this country, that letter will get there.
Yep.
It is incredibly efficient when we have people who want it to working there, who are not put in to basically privatize it. And if you live in a remote rural area of this, I mean, first of all, the post office was basically what bound this country together as a country. It allowed for the country to communicate with each other. We don't need it in the same way that we needed it at the time, but still, the ability for you to live in a rural town in Wyoming or Iowa or Nebraska or Arkansas and get a letter to me in New York City in a couple of days for 80 cents or send me a package without having to pay 40, 50, 60 bucks, even if it's an envelope through FedEx or DHL or UPS, is magic. And even those companies ride on the infrastructure of the post office. And we've had at times, it was back in the 60s, where we had postal banking, where you could go to the post office and get basic banking done And we have this apparatus already set up. We have the branches. We have the coordination. We are underutilizing the post office because, again, right-wing forces in this country for the last 50 years have been targeting examples of the federal government doing things that work for the American public. It has been a long-term project, and they have been pretty successful in demonizing these places. You know, people tell me, like, you go to the DMV. There are some cities where you go to the DMV, it's tough because there's a lot of people there. But broadly speaking, go to your cable company and see what that's like. It's far worse. Try and call your private insurance company and get them to deal with a claim. It is far worse. I mean, this is the idea that the post office doesn't function amazingly well, I think is absurd. And to the extent that we've had problems with it, it has largely been a project of Donald Trump's Postmaster General to essentially privatize a significant portion of the post office so that, you know, and this is a term from when we were talking about the privatization of Social Security. These outfits want this so-called dumb money, which is money, taxpayer money, that they can go in and they know that the people who are paying attention to this money, their agenda is to throw it out the door to private contractors. And, you know, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at people who fundamentally do not like government. And when you put them in charge of government, they're going to set out to make it bad. So the first attack we're going to see on Social Security is not going to be cutting benefits. The first attack we're going to see is going to be on the Social Security Administration.
Exactly.
So that your Social Security payments get screwed up. And then you're like, I don't like Social Security because my payments get screwed up. But they're going in there doing that. Musk fired all the people who designed the free e-file for IRS. And I promise you, the system that works so well on the e-file in a pilot program last year, this year, as it's rolled out to everybody, is going to be full of bugs by design so that people want to get rid of it. And I guarantee you within 2 years, that system, which saved your average American a couple of $100 on filing their taxes and made it much more simple for them, is going to go away because people are going to be like, it doesn't work.
Exactly. Yeah, it's sabotage. It's sabotage.
100%
sabotage. They go in and
100%
exactly
sabotage.
like you said. They want to, where government is working well, like the post office. They want to go in and cut it up to make it worse, to feed into their talking points, so that they can come back and say, "Oh, look, isn't government so bad?" Sam, we've kept you on for a while, a little bit longer than we originally said. So really appreciate your time. Always enjoy talking to you. The last question that I have for you is, we're a union radio program. I'm a union member. I'm president of the AFL-CIO Council in North Alabama. My co-host is a union member, the chair of our political committee for our labor council. So we're really involved. Obviously, we don't speak for the labor movement as a whole. But if you had a question, if you could pose a question to the labor movement writ large, what would your question be to us?
Well, I will. First, I say SAG-AFTRA member, 30-year.
Wow.
32-year member of both SAG and AFTRA, and former WGA member. I haven't written a script in too long to still be a member, but I'm vested. I basically am. I guess my question for the labor movement is, how quickly can May of 2028 get here? I'm looking for the labor movement to figure out a way to step outside of the constraints of Taft-Hartley and organize in a way that is focused on using the power of withholding labor. The administrative state can definitely help, but it's not going to be a help for the labor movement for some time. And so I'm looking for, what they're willing to do. But this is really a question of like individual workers have to, come to the realization that their power is a function of being in solidarity with other workers. And one person alone, it's not enough for them to withhold their labor. They need to do it. They need the protection and the power that comes with being organized. And so, I hope labor leadership realizes this is a make or break moment, because
yeah, us too. And that
the agenda is clear.
Yeah, exactly. In May of 2028, that's definitely something that we're tracking. Our Labor Council has endorsed a resolution that several other labor councils across the country and some state AFL-CIO federations have endorsed, endorsing the UAW's call to align contracts for May 2028. We passed that at our Labor Council unanimously. It was pretty exciting, and there was another one in Alabama that has. So hopefully, we're going to see more labor federations across the country adopting stuff like that and begin planning for May of 2028, because it'll be here before we know it, and it's really important. So Sam Seder, host of the Majority Report, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. Really enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll be able to get you back on before too long.
And hope you feel better.
Hope you feel better.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. Jacob, always a pleasure. I really appreciate what you guys do. I'm so glad you're out here. I'm so happy you're on multiple radio stations. I've watched you grow this thing over the past, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years, maybe more now.
Yeah, we started in May of 2020. Isn't that a terrible time to start a new project?
Well, I'll tell you, you guys have done a lot in a brief amount of time, relative to this business. And so, I really appreciate the work you're doing, and I hope people tell other people about your show. It's important to spread it around.
Thanks. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate it.
That's it for the first half of the program, folks. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this morning. We really appreciate it. Just a few reminders before we wrap. You can go to labornotes.org/events for free and low-cost trainings. Definitely recommend you check that out. We're also proud to remind folks that we are part of Means TV, a worker-owned streaming cooperative. You can subscribe to Means TV with our discount code TVLR and receive 20% off either your first month or the entire year. A lot of great programs on that site, including a documentary covering the unionization of a poultry plant in the South and the Amazon labor union campaign. So definitely check it out. Lots and lots of good stuff on there. If you're not on our email list, you're missing out. We got an exhaustive weekly roundup of goings-on of labor in the South, and also Southern employers being held accountable for injuring, killing, discriminating against, or, stealing from their workers. You can subscribe to our newsletters at TVLR.fm. That's Last Week in Southern Labor and Boss Watch. They arrive pretty much every week, usually Mondays and Tuesdays. We've got great hats, stickers, and t-shirts at tvlr.fm/store. And if you want to be part of helping us stay on the air, you can donate at patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report or tvlr.fm/donate. And of course, once more, we would love to hear your thoughts on the show. Let us know what you thought of the interview with Sam. Let us know what you thought of the interview with the folks behind the Alabama Solution. You can leave a voicemail anytime throughout the week, 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. Or use our contact form on our website, tvlr.fm/contact. We're going to head into overtime now, where we'll be playing an interview Jacob did last week with Ohio's Ed Flash Ference, again, the host of America's Workforce podcast. They talk about politics and the labor movement. So again, look for us online to keep listening, YouTube, Facebook. But if you don't, thank you so much for your time, and we will see you next week. Solidarity forever. This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio show and online news outfit in the South, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Joe Harrison, the video producer and graphic designer, filling in for Adam and Jacob, who are out on holiday break. And we appreciate you spending some time with us. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, the number is 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. You can also send us a note, of course, on our website, tvlr.fm/contact. We're really excited to share this next interview with y'all. Jacob recorded this conversation with Ed Flash Ference. They recorded this last week. Obviously, he is a huge inspiration for us here at the Valley Labor Report, so it's always great to get his thoughts on the state of things in the country. So without further ado, here is Jacob talking with Ohio's Ed Flash Ference, host of the only daily union talk radio program in the country.
We have on the line now, big friend of the show, huge deal, the biggest deal, some say, Ed Flash Ference, member of SAG-AFTRA and host of America's Workforce, to do sort of a year-in review with us here on the Valley Labor Report. Flash, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I appreciate it.
Hey, anytime. You've been very kind to me on my podcast, America's Workforce. So I got to share some of the love of Northeast Ohio to the folks in Alabama.
Absolutely. Well, you have been very kind to us as well. We really appreciate your support of our program and giving us some regular time there. Hope your listeners enjoy it. And while we're talking about your program, can you tell, we've had you on the show before. It's been a while now. I mean, I guess we should probably do this a little bit more regularly, potentially. But for the folks who somehow have not heard of America's Workforce, or maybe they haven't listened in a long time, can you tell folks a little bit about it, kind of what y'all do, what you focus on, stuff like that?
Yeah, well, let me give you a little history of the show. And I remember when it went on the air, it was on an AM station. Back in 1993,
That's when it started. And it's funny, too, because the gentleman who hosted the show is somebody that I knew in college radio when I was going to Cleveland State. And I trained him on his radio career. He ended up doing a lot of documentaries and things. And he was, of course, a union member. And I joined the show in 1998, and I needed some work. And I'll tell you why. I worked in rock radio for almost 22 years at the home of the buzzer, WMMS. And if you go online and read about Jeff and Flash, you'll see all kind of pictures from the 70s. Some of them pretty scary, but we had a great time. And that was the heyday of FM radio or breaking music. Rock artists were stopping by. They loved the station. I mean, we were so involved in the community. And that's the station that brought you the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum. We got on that campaign in the early 80s. And it's here today. And it's so funny, too, Jacob. Should I call you Jacob or Jake?
Either one is fine with me. I don't really have a preference. My wife calls me Jake. Everybody in my professional life calls me Jacob. So
Okay. I'll mix it up a little bit for the sense of this interview. But a lot of people said, "What do you want? A Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland? That's really going to bring a bad element to the town." We're scratching our heads, wondering, "Come on now, wake up!" And the same people are now saying, "Hey, that was a pretty good idea." It's funny how that works, but it was a big accomplishment for so many of us. We had a great team there. Then I did a couple of years of talk radio and found my way because that kind of dried up and I needed some work. And I got a call from the producers. There was somebody there that was getting a full-time job at another radio station. It was an hour show. It used to air live on WERE in the morning from 7 to 8. And they would feed me guests. It's produced by BMA Media, which is a union production house in northeastern Ohio. And I said, "Yeah, I'll check it out. I'll do it. I'm a union guy. My dad was a steel worker. All members of my family practically were union members. So I understood what unions are all about. And WMMS was a union station. I joined the American Federation of TV Radio Artists in 1974. And that was a requirement because anybody that went on the air joined the union. And so that takes me 51 years. And you may know that SAG, the Screen Actors Guild, joined with AFTRA about a dozen years ago. So it's the SAG-AFTRA union now. But that show was going really, really well. We were interviewing a whole lot of people. But, with a 5,000-watt AM signal in the morning, it was somewhat limited. And when fast forward to the pandemic in 2000, the owner of BMA Media, Jared Bork, we had lunch and he said, "Flash, I think it's time to podcast." And 5 years ago, podcasts are nothing where they are today. Nothing. And and you know how quickly the whole broadcast and radio and TV climate collectively has changed ever since the advent of the internet. So we started, and it was a slow start, and it really started to explode. And what it did, it broadened the horizon of the show from a lot of the guests were local, exclusive to Northeast Ohio and Ohio. And Jared told me, he says, "Flash, your audience is national, if not global now." And, that took a while to sink in because, I'm born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. Okay. And when you're like that, and when I worked in rock radio, it was all about Northeastern Ohio. So there was a learning curve, but I love it. I love it. And we're finding now that a lot of the people that listen to the show are West Coast. They are, west of the Mississippi River. We're getting listeners from your area in the South. We're still strong in Ohio, East Coast. I mean, it's working, and we get correspondence from people from all over, and they love the show because it's so unique, and it's 5 days a week. That's the beauty of it. So each show is a little bit different from the previous show, and we try to cover as much. Labor's International, LIUNA, is our presenting sponsor, followed by the Steelworkers, the Communication Workers of America. We've got the Teamsters. In Ohio, we have the Ohio AFL-CIO. We do have Fred Redmond. Now, Fred is a little bit ill right now. Apparently, he's recovering. Yeah, he's recovering in his home in, I believe he's hanging out. He's retired from the steelworkers. I believe he's back home in Pittsburgh right now. But he's a part of the show. We wish him well, and he should be back on the show as well. But he, through Fred's relationship and the steelworkers, were able to secure a sponsorship from the AFL-CIO. So it's been pretty good. And with everything that's going on with unions, the show, it has an impact. There's no question, especially this year. I know you want to talk about the effects of the current administration, and we could get into that. But I love it. I really love it. I spent a lot of time researching guests. We have actually two producers. We have Kelsey Coyne, who I think you have talked to him. And in fact, Kelsey is from the South. He knows Alabama very, very well. And we kind of joke about the difference between Ohio and Alabama a lot. But Alabama, of all the southern states, you got a lot of union activity, so you should be proud of that. And I would imagine, take some credit on the Valley Labor Report for what you're doing over there to spread the good word about unions, and that's important that we continue to do that.
We like to think that we make a bit of a difference. And there's actually, you mentioned the steelworkers. We just announced today on the program that the steelworkers have a big campaign right here in Huntsville. 155 workers at ATI Materials have filed for a union election with the steelworkers. So I sent an email this morning to the state Fed president, Brent Riley. He's a steelworker. And I was like, hey, let me know how I can help, whether with the radio program or, with the Labor Council. You mentioned that y'all started on the radio and you started doing podcasting. You're still on the radio in Northeast Cleveland, right?
Yeah, I have a Saturday show, and it's,
okay.
Jacob, you have to know something. When you get the radio bug, you can't get it out of you. I mean, it infects your entire body. And what I did, it was a financial show that started about 20 years ago, and on actually the show, the station that I used to do America's Workforce on, WERE, and it's a Saturday morning thing. That's a live show, and it's entertainment oriented, restaurants. It's also tied into the nonprofit community. I do a lot with the food bank, charities. I'm involved in the MS Society. I have two children with MS, so we promote what's going on there. And I do some PR work for the Make-A-Wish Society and the Home Builders Society in Northeastern Ohio. We're doing a campaign. It's kind of similar to St. Jude. You might know about the St. Jude home. Well, this is, you buy a $100 raffle ticket and you can get a new house, which is ridiculously priced. But so I'm involved in that kind of stuff. And the fact that I'm from, this area, everybody seems to know Flash up here, and it's opened a lot of doors. So I want to keep opening those doors. And I just want to, I love to talk about the good things. There's a lot of good things that are happening. And I call it the soundtrack of Cleveland, kind of like what MMS was back in the day.
I didn't realize that America's Workforce, the daily program, didn't air on the radio anymore. For some reason, I thought that y'all had at least that station in Northeast Ohio. That's funny. We're trying to get more into the radio, actually, and I might talk to you after we get off the air about some opportunities that I have here locally potentially. But we're really trying to focus on building our radio audience and the kind of online stuff we think of as a little bit more of an after, like a secondary thing.
I get it, and radio is very challenging today. I think the producers, while BMA Media itself, saw the fact that they weren't getting the buzz out of just Northeastern Ohio. That's when they really wanted to expand the show, and a lot of our guests they're from all over the country, and it's important. Hey, what's going on in Oregon? What's going on in California? What's going on in New York? And and Illinois. Illinois is a great area. We're doing a lot. That has to do with their very proactive AFL-CIO over there. In fact, we're going to feature somebody on Monday's podcast, which will be the December 15th podcast. I want to get into that too, because it just shows the collective power of unions. But the thing I like about doing the show is how different America is. I think we all know that. You know what's going on in the South with the right to work states, but that has not stopped unions. And it's refreshing to hear how creative some people are in various parts of the country when it comes to organizing and to being vocal about what's going on in their community. What comes to mind, this has nothing to do with unions, but you know what's going on with the ICE raids. And I have to giggle about folks in Oregon. It was right around Halloween when they're dressing up in costumes, and they said, "Well, there's a kangaroo over there that may not be documented."
Right.
I mean, it's amazing, and you have to think outside the box. Scabby the rats. I mean, things like that, where you get attention, and it's all about messaging. And if you can just be creative and find different ways to get your point across, you win. You win. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and you talked about how there's so many different things happening all over the country. I'm going just from your last couple of weeks of episodes. You had folks from Las Vegas, the Culinary Workers Union. You've had a bunch of people talking about national stories. Teamsters taking on airline maintenance outsourcing at United Airlines. There's a couple of Ohio stories. You had my co-host Adam on to talk about the recall injustice at Hyundai Kia campaign. There was a story out of New Jersey fighting for affordable health care, CWA's advocacy in New Jersey, the Supreme Court. I mean, so it really is pretty clearly kind of a show with a national audience in mind, and you do interviews with a lot of people. It's a union radio, union podcast program, and so unions are at the center of it. But you've got, you have journalists, activists, authors, historians on. What would you say are your favorite kinds of interviews to do on America's workforce?
That's an interesting question, and I think the best way to start off with an answer to that would be anything involving worker safety. And I say this on the show many times, Jacob, that if you have a job where you get up in the morning and you can't come home at the end of the day, that job ain't worth it. Or if you get injured on that job. And sadly, what we're seeing, especially in this administration, is a pullback on regulations. Regulations are there for a reason. Let's be honest. Are we overregulated? That could be. I mean, sometimes they go a little too far, but the bottom line is that they're there for a reason. And I have to thank you for, and I finally got a hold of this guy. He's going to post next week. Jordan Bareb, who is a former OSHA. OSHA assistant manager or something some years back, but he's the author of Confined Space. I saw that in one of your, either it was Boss Watch or Southern Labor Report. And I think I emailed him a couple of times, and maybe I had the wrong email, but I did a recording with him last week. It was just incredible. Brilliant guy. And that being said, I mean, you could tell his education. He worked with AFSCME. He's a union guy. He understands what worker safety is all about. And I think that topic, NCOSH is another organization, the National Council of Occupational Safety and Health. And it's important that we show what's going on and how OSHA, well, it's grossly underfunded, okay? We know that. And these plants are not being inspected. I mean, a lot of these plants are horrible, especially in some of these processing plants, horrible working conditions. And it goes back to what I originally said. If that job is that dangerous, come on, something's got to be done. And you got to come home at the end of the day. You work hard. You got to support your family. You want to send your kids to decent schools. And I think that really hits me hard. My dad was a steel worker. And when I got out of college, I worked 2 summers there, and luckily, I mean, I was wrapping some steel, and I told my dad, I said, "Dad, how the hell did you do this for 40 years? You know, I don't know how." I mean, you have to understand, my dad came out of the Depression, my parents did, and manufacturing was king in America. I mean, think of the steel mills, the factories back in the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s. And that was a job, and that was one job you had for life, but it was a tough job. It was a really tough job. And the unions made it safer. And he told me that. And that just resonated with me to today. And I think it's important that we keep pounding that message to everybody, that if there's something wrong in your workplace, you have to speak up. And that's where the power of the union comes in, because you know that people have spoken up, and if they didn't have the protection of a union, they lost their job. They lost their job. They told them to shut up, leave it alone. Doesn't matter. Or they'll find somebody else to do that job.
Right.
So that one hits home. But you mentioned historians. I love talking to historians. I love talking to anybody that's more educated than I, because I have a bachelor's degree. I did finish school, but there's so many people out there that have law degrees, and we had Julie Sue on the show just before she got fired earlier this year, and brilliant lady. I mean, here's somebody that came from China. I mean, she was as humble as they come, and she found her way up. She's just brilliant. And she was acting labor secretary, and she was all about unions. Lynn Reinhardt from she was with the AFL-CIO, and she's now with the Economic Policy Institute. The scholars, I love talking to them and picking their brains and kind of carving up the research that they worked on for so long, and what that means, and getting that information out there. Stories about the wage gap, the wealth gap, is where I mean, I'm looking at the ridiculous tax cuts, and I know you've covered this on your show. And this is ridiculous what's going on in America when the rich are getting rich. I don't know how they're going to even spend that amount of money. And here we can't even afford to keep our school doors open when they keep, cutting taxes and cutting taxes. But I like getting into those dynamics. And there's so much of that available out there, as you well know.
Right. Yeah, I'm glad that I've been able to connect you with Jordan Barab sort of through my work, because since I found it, I think earlier this year, that's been one of the few places that I regularly, at least weekly, check out what they're putting out. They have some really, really great stuff, and especially his work on, just tracking what they're doing with the silica dust rule at MSHA. As it relates to black lung, I think he's been doing some really good work there, and like you said, just really, obviously a very knowledgeable guy, like knows what he's talking about.
One thing. I'm sorry to interrupt
no,
here,
go
but
ahead.
one thing he told me, there's like 14 to 15 people that die every day on their job in America, and when you do the math on that, it's about 100 a week.
Yeah.
And Jordan told me this was surprising, because he gathers this information from websites, news articles, and he was able to gather, I believe it was like around 24 or 25 stories of people. They'll show up in the paper. Somebody, fell into a ditch or something, and it collapsed. And he said, by the way, when it comes to trench work, he says that is the most preventable workplace accident, and they happen all the time.
And that's the shocking thing about it, is because everybody knows what you got. Like, I've never worked in a trench before in my life, but it's pretty intuitive what you got to do to keep it from falling over. You got to reinforce it. Everybody knows you got to reinforce it, and the bosses are so lazy, they're so greedy that they just don't do it. They're just and people die because of it all the time. And it's so frustrating.
And you know what's frustrating about that? When somebody dies, how much is the fine? pretty low. I mean, like, I don't know.
maximum fine, I think, for a first-time offense is $16,000 for a death. It's crazy.
Yeah. So here's the employer saying, "Oh well, 16,000. I'll make that up, no problem." Hey, by the way, who's next in line? Who wants to get in the trench next? And sadly, that's when they'll bring some immigrant worker can't even speak the language and that needs a job because they came from a third world country. You know the story. You know where I'm going with this. It's ridiculous.
Right. Well, and we had him on to talk about, there was a big Washington Post feature about, the title of the feature was something like "The Most Deadly Workplace in America." And would you believe it was in Alabama? It was this sawmill or something that, like, 4 or 5 people died at that place over 4 or 5 years. It was crazy. And that was just the deaths. I mean, people were getting injured all the time. People were losing fingers, losing hands, losing limbs. And OSHA would find the thing, but they don't have the authority to stop work over failure to pay. They have the authority to stop work theoretically over imminent safety issues, but they can't say you have to stop until you remedy the issues. They can't. They don't have the authority, and so OSHA was not able to stop this, and it kept killing people, and eventually it was shut down. But you know why it was shut down? It was shut down because it was stealing water from the municipal water supply. Somehow they had like plugged in, and they were like still, and so the municipality revoked their business license because they were able to. It was like Al Capone being caught on taxes instead of doing all of the gangster stuff. The municipality revoked their business license and said you got to close because they stole like $30,000 worth of water, and not because all of the people that they killed. I mean, and so Jordan and I talked about that for a little while. It's crazy. It's crazy how little we value people's lives in this country.
Yeah.
Sickening.
Yeah, I wonder, did they ever pay the city back for all the water that they stole?
I don't think so. No, I think it just closed and it went bankrupt, and the guy's not in jail either. I mean, the guy's just like running around, fine, and he's responsible for people dying and stealing water. And it's, I mean. I had some. There was a local group of a local couple of small business owners or something here in Huntsville that started a podcast, and so they found me, and they're doing this. They were doing this business podcast or whatever. And so obviously we have like different perspectives about things. These are like business people, even though like, small business owners, there's a lot of stuff, but they think of themselves, they're like aspirational billionaires. Literally, that's what they told me. So they've got a really different mindset. And they were talking about how much risk they take on as business owners or whatever. And it's like, if somebody died on the job, I could go to jail. And I'm like, I wish you could go to jail, but you can't. It's like you're either lying or you just don't know anything at all about anything. Yeah. And here you're doing a podcast trying to like influence people, and you don't know the first thing about being an employer, and that's like your whole thing is you're an employer. I don't know. I get it. It's just
Jacob. I want you on my show next week. We got to talk about this.
Well, that was like years old, and
it doesn't matter. It's still happening today. You know that, brother.
It is. Oh, no doubt it is. But the funny thing is, they called their podcast "No Excuses" or something like that, and they ended up. Like, they just haven't done the podcast in like years, and so I guess they found an excuse to stop doing the podcast. And so, but I was so frustrated. We titled the episode something like "Trying to Explain to Bosses for 2 Hours Labor Law." Trying to explain labor law to two bosses for 2 hours or something like that. Yeah. It was crazy. Well, and so we've been talking about safety, and we've been kind of dancing around some of the ways that the Trump administration is rolling back safety, and specifically we talked about a little bit about the silica dust rule that they're trying to roll back at MSHA, and just for people who don't know, black lung is significantly increasing for coal miners in this country because the incidence of silica dust in coal mines is increasing, and silica dust is 20 times more toxic than coal dust. I didn't realize that.
Right.
But they're running into silica more often because now the veins are getting thinner. They've, in West Virginia and Kentucky in particular, they've mined through all of the good coal, and so they're having to dig further and deeper into thinner seams, and so they're running into just a bunch of rock, and so it's kicking up a lot of silica dust. And now 1 in 8 coal miners who have been in the mines for 15 to 20 years have black lung, and the rate was 1 in 30 only 13 years ago.
Right.
I mean, it's just exploded, and so the Biden administration quite prudently said we should probably do something about all the coal miners dying of black lung. That seems like a problem. And so they said, we got to limit silica dust to the same level that people in non-coal mines. Silica dust is already regulated. You know this on like construction sites and stuff. It's got to be no more than certain parts per million. But for some reason, that doesn't apply to coal miners. And so the Biden MSHA said, well, we're going to have some parity and we're going to make it the same. And now the Trump administration is rolling that back. And so that's one of the things, obviously, the Trump administration is doing to make workers less safe. But just kind of generally, I'm curious what your general thoughts are on the first year of Trump's second term.
It's Trump on super steroids. I mean, that's the short answer. I think we knew there was going to be an attack, especially on federal workers. I mean, he did everything he could in the first administration. What I didn't expect, well, first of all, I don't think anybody expected Elon Musk getting free reign in Washington, and God knows what kind of data that he was able to secure. I, for one, and anybody watching this right now should be very, very concerned about Social Security, because there's a lot of information, and we all know, once your Social Security number gets out there, we have problems. You're going to have a lot of problems. And I've been on Social Security for a couple of years now, so I have to question what's going to happen. You got these young kids that are sifting through that data. Who knows what they're doing with that? But what was really, really surprising was the attack on collective bargaining. And the first one that he went after was TSA. And sadly, this last year, and I followed the TSA when it was created. I remember 9/11. I remember when Bush formed the Transportation Security Administration and TSO officers, that they were not allowed to join a union, to collectively bargain. That didn't happen until Obama came into office. So it was a struggle. And we're talking about people not making very much money. $30,000 a year, and maybe after 20 years they're making like 45,000. That's it. In today's economy, you can't raise a family on something like that. But last year, after this ridiculous struggle, they came up with like a 7-year contract that was like really good. I mean, finally there was some security. People can rest assured that they can stay in that job and have a decent pension when they came out. And here comes Trump. Boom. He tears it up. And for the life of me, I couldn't figure that out. And then he started attacking other unions and more unions. And right now, with this Protect America's Workforce Act, that a lot of members of Congress saying enough is enough. Well, what are you doing here? We got to restore those rights. I, for one, did not expect that kind of attack on the federal workforce. And there's a lot of people that are no longer in the federal workforce today. Either they left, they took that so-called buyout, and that was early on in the administration, or they were fired. They just cut them, chop, chop, chop. The other part of this, and he owns the Supreme Court, and this is something we talked about on the show. This was the Friday show, so those of you that are want to check this out, awfpodcast.com. That was the December 12th edition. We have a labor lawyer by the name of Andrew Strom, who's Harvard educated. He used to work with SEIU, New York City, and we tore apart the arguments on it's Trump versus Slaughter. Rebecca Slaughter worked at the Federal Trade Commission, and this is what they call the unitary executive. Well, Trump, you have all these agencies. Okay, the Federal Trade Commission, the Food and Drug Administration. Well, one of them is the National Labor Relations Board. Okay, right. And what they want to do here is give Trump more power to pick and choose who's going to be on these boards, and they are independent for a reason. I mean, look at the Federal Reserve. There's another one. He wanted, he's telling Jerome Powell, "Hey, lower rates because I said so." And when you're putting these people, it just mirrors his cabinet because you got all yes people in there. Right. If you don't agree with Trump, you're out of here. You're fired, or he'll humiliate you and pretty much blacklist you for whatever you're doing because you're not a team player anymore. Well, this argument, and it's funny too because you listen to the arguments by the justices, and I think we all know where that decision is going to go come probably May, June, when they come out with their decisions. But right now, it's really scary. It's really scary the amount of power that has been just sucked up by the executive branch. And it's like the Supreme Court is rubber stamping everything. And we knew he appointed 3 justices. Again, though, I didn't expect to go this far. This is the scary part about it right now.
It really is. It's so, I was kind of trying to, after he was elected, say like, okay, look, we made it through the first term, and ultimately, there was a lot of things that we didn't like, but ultimately the biggest thing that he did was he did a tax cut, and federal workers didn't get raises for a few years, but more or less kind of things were okay, and there's a lot of problems, but like we made it through, we muddled through, and like hopefully this will just be kind of more of the same. And that's actually, we're on a couple of conservative radio stations, and so every now and then I'll go on these conservative talk radio shows and I'll have them on my program. And so I had a long conversation at the end of last year after the election with one of these guys. And I was like, what do you think? And he was like, yeah, it'll be basically like Trump 1.0, I mean, it'll basically be fine. It was great. We had a tax cut, and that's all that's going to happen, basically. And, very clearly that is not all that's happened. And, it's so concerning. The way that they're talking about, what they want to do to people who disagree with them. Yeah, I mean, I just talked on the program this morning to Chris Doles. I'm sure you must have had him on your program at some point. Maybe you haven't. The executive director of the Federal Unionists Network. Are you familiar with them?
No, I'm not.
The Federal Unionists Network is sort of this sort of like the TDU for all federal unions. Like they're not just a caucus within one union. They're a cross-craft caucus of federal workers, basically. And they've done a lot, to fight for federal workers. And they've had 2 of their members one of them was a member of AFGE also, and another one was a member of NTEU, fired for some of the things that they did. One of them was an attorney at the HUD. He was a civil rights housing enforcer or something, and he did a whistleblower complaint with Elizabeth Warren's office, and they fired him for that. They're trying to fire him for that. And then there was another one who worked in the food stamps program, an NTEU member, and she was on MSNBC just talking about, the thing that really was crazy about her is that she was fired for an interview that she did on MSNBC where all she said ultimately was she's concerned about what will happen to the people that she serves, to the Americans that she serves if the food stamp program goes unfunded. And she did not even say Trump's name. She did not even specifically criticize the administration. She just said she's concerned about what's going to happen, and they fired her. She was the president of her union. And so anyway, I mean, just, it's so concerning. And you talked earlier about the ICE stuff. I mean, those guys getting 10 times their budget from last year is, who knows what they're going to do.
Oh, I know that's really scary, and the fact, with the masks and all that. And did you know that I don't know where I heard this. It might have been on CNN that like 75% of the arrests are actual U.S.
Yeah.
citizens. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I thought it was just people. 75% of the arrests were people who had not committed a crime. I thought
No.
that was it.
Oh, maybe I got that confused. Because they said that they were going to go after people that were
Right.
so-called undocumented criminal with a criminal record. Well,
Right.
that's but the problem with that is the quotas that
Mhm.
that they put on all this, so they got to get so many of them. But I know a lot of them are. I mean, it's the color the color of your skin. I saw a story. Speaking of that, okay, this was on CNN maybe a couple of months ago. There was a African American couple, or no, I'm sorry, Mexican couple.
Mhm.
They lived in Pittsburgh, and they came here legally. They came here. They're both U.S. citizens. They have all their children, of course, are citizens. They decided to move back to Mexico with their relatives for hopefully, they'll come back after this administration. They fear because of the color of their skin, they're going to be picked up by ICE. I mean, that's how bad it is right now. People that don't look white are scared as hell right now because even though you are legal, you've got some officer that thinks you are not legal, and they're gonna hog tie you. They're gonna grab you. They're gonna throw you in jail, and then you're gonna sit in jail for a couple of days, and then they're gonna realize you're legal and say, "Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, you can go now." I mean, that's what is this, like Nazi Germany or what? I mean, that's exactly what's happening right now. Nazi Germany they'd go a little far. They'd kill you anyway just because they don't like you. They don't like the way you look. But yeah, it's really scary. And I don't know if you're following the polls, but during the campaign, this hot button issue of illegal borders did resonate with voters. And it worked. And it's the old line. If you're going to say something long enough, people are going to believe it. And they're talking about this invasion that's coming in from the southern border. And, there was some of that was true. Not maybe to the extent of what they're talking about. But the people now are saying in the polls that it's gone too far.
Yeah.
It's gone too far. It's ridiculous.
Well, even specifically on immigration, like he has been, like immigration was the one thing that was kind of, people ask, like, how do you feel about what's your approval of Trump on the economy, Trump on immigration, Trump on crime, Trump on LGBT issues or whatever. And everything else was underwater for pretty quickly. But immigration was one where people had really been kind of radicalized against immigrants, and that was positive for a while, and it has started to go down. And so, as we're wrapping up, I've got two more questions and that I wanted to get to, and just on this topic, I'm curious what you make of how the Democrats have responded to Trump's second term.
You sure you want to wrap it up on this one?
Well, I've got one more that'll be maybe less what's the word, polarizing.
Well,
controversial.
Yeah, I'm trying to hear the Democrats here. Where are they? Oh, it's sad. It really is sad.
Yeah.
And I don't know if part of them are just waiting for everything to blow up so they could say, "Hey, come back to us." I come from a media landscape I grew up when radio was strong, when there were 3 networks. I grew up in that. I told you, in a union household. And, the whole climate today is different. It's all about messaging. And I will give you, you're dealing with a celebrity in the White House, and people are gravitated toward that. And he is one hell of a media messenger. He has learned very well. He did this. If you go back to his New York days, people will tell you the same thing. He found his way to the Howard Stern show. He found his way to the news, the tabloids. Every day it was Trump, 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 Trump. He has taken that. That's who he is. He has taken that to the White House, and and now we're hearing it on Truth Social, as crazy as it is. But that's what's bombarding the American people. Now, I will grant one Democrat that did fight back, and that's Gavin Newsom, who had a lot of fun. I really thought that he was very entertaining, and that's what it's all about today. It's all about entertainment. The guy's an entertainer. And Gavin fought back and got a lot of buzz on social media. Unfortunately,
you know what? You ought to get on Gavin's podcast. He has a podcast now. He ought to interview you. Get some pointers.
That's a great idea. I like that idea.
I like it.
Okay. Yeah. Who knows? He might be president someday. That would be kind of cool. Get a pass to the White House or something. But yeah, who I really like though right now is Mark Kelly. I think I think Mark Kelly could be a great president. I think of like Eisenhower. Now Eisenhower, of course, was a Republican, but that military background, that war hero status, he's not far to the left, very central, and that's where America is. It's very much in the middle. You know that. If there was an independent party, they'd win. They'd win.
Here's another bug that I'll put in your ear. Have you heard of the Center for Working Class Politics?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Have you had Jared Abbott or Les Leopold on to talk about their recent report?
I had Les Leopold on. He was on earlier this year, but we didn't really get into that. It was okay. It was his latest book, I believe.
Well, yeah. So that's the Center for Working Class Politics just put out a report back late in October about the prospects for independent politics, not outside of Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah.
And they felt like they identified a potential for an independent, pro-worker, populist sort of person to run in races where Democrats are not contesting. Like Nebraska, like Dan Osborne in Nebraska.
Exactly.
They said that's like a really good strategy potentially. So.
You know what? I'm going to have Dan on the show. We're recording him in the next 2 weeks. He's a hard one to get a hold of because number one, he's got a full-time job and he's campaigning. But I'll tell you, he's scared. He scared an incumbent last year.
Yes,
he really did.
Absolutely.
And that's when the National came in and poured a lot of money because he was polling. He was polling equally with the Republican incumbent, and he's going back. And here's the guy who's an independent. He's a steam fitter. He led the strike against Kellogg's back in 2017. He doesn't care. He said, look, and I think he's a veteran too.
Yes. No, he's great. He's so awesome.
but here's the guy. He says, I don't care. No, Democrat, Republican, they don't mean anything to me. It's all about working class issues. And I'll tell you, when you focus on working class issues, we all win. I mean, that is number one. Here's another thing I want to say real quick. And unions do a great job. And they have a lot. They have a lot on their plate right now. Let's be honest. The important takeaway on this, Jacob, is not just one union, not just two unions, not just three unions. How about 30 unions? I bring this up because on a show that I'm going to have on Monday, this is going to be on the December 15th show, I had a member of she's actually in 4 unions. One of them is my union, Carrie Lee Patterson. She was her 4 unions and like 26 others were all involved in the state of Illinois' campaign, the workers' campaign with the governor, and they have a pro-union, pro-worker governor there, but there's some in the legislature that didn't want to fund public transit to where it should be funded. And they were going to cut it to the point where, fares would go up, number one. Who's that going to hurt? Poor people, okay? And those that are disabled, those that can't drive, disabled. There's so many people that rely on public transit. That's a big issue, especially in Chicago. 30 unions got together. Think about that. 30 unions got together and took it to the finish line. Yeah. And this is something, too. I just noticed this the other day in Utah. You heard of the attack on collective bargaining in Utah?
Yes.
What was going on over there?
Yeah.
From what I picked up, the guy that introduced that is backing off because they were going to take this to a vote of the people. And what does that tell you? What does that tell you? Get together. I really think, and this goes for the Democrats too. I don't think they know how much power they have. Unions don't know how much power they have. Not one union, but collectively. Collectively.
right.
And that's why Trump attacked collective bargaining rights, because there's strength in numbers. There's strength in numbers. And when people start speaking up, guess what? Whoa, we got to pull back. Oh, we didn't mean that. We're going to change. Okay, don't worry about, we're not going to do. Oh, we were thinking about right to work, but no, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. We've been talking to Ed Flash Ferentz, host of America's Workforce, member of SAG-AFTRA. Flash, I got to let you go. I got my next guest in the waiting room, but I've really enjoyed it. Appreciate what you do and appreciate your time. Thank you so much for taking the time, and folks should check out, obviously, America's Workforce.
Hey, let's do this some more. And thank you for what you're doing on the Valley Labor Report. I'll tell you, we need the mouth of the South down there, buddy. So keep it going.
All right, brother. I appreciate it.
All right, folks, that's going to be it for today's program. Thank you all so much for spending some time with us. Don't forget, check out labornotes.org/events for free and low-cost trainings. Can't recommend that enough. Once again, we're proud to remind folks that we are part of Means TV, a worker-owned streaming cooperative. You can subscribe to Means TV with our discount code, TVLR, and receive 20% off either your first month or the entire year. There are lots of great programs on the site, including a documentary covering the unionization of a poultry plant here in the South, as well as the Amazon Labor Union campaign. If you're not on our email list, you're missing out, and you really should fix that. You can go to our site, tvlr.fm, and let us know that you would like to receive our 2 newsletters, Last Week in Southern Labor, where we take a look at what workers are doing in the South, and Boss Watch, which is all about Southern employers being held accountable. So you can probably imagine we'd never run out of things to talk about with that. So again, go to tvlr.fm and use the contact form to let us know that you would like to sign up for these weekly newsletters. You can also check out past entries there. We put them all up on the website as articles, so definitely check those out. We've got great hats, stickers, and t-shirts, as always, at tvlr.fm/store. And if you want to be part of helping us stay on the air, you can donate at patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report, or go to tvlr.fm/donate. And as always, we would love to hear your thoughts, whether good or bad. We love to hear from y'all, so definitely reach out to us. You can leave a voicemail anytime throughout the entire week. 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. Or you can also use the contact form on our website, tvlr.fm/contact. That's going to do it for us. So I hope that y'all have a great Christmas, and we will see you next week. All power to the workers.